How does one become an artist with Selmer?
That's a great question. So it depends on a lot of things. We used to have an actual link on the website that I said like maybe it was like contact to if you have an interest in becoming an artist. That is no longer on the website. I mean, we have lots of artists, um, and at this point, we really reach out to the artists that we would like to be added to the roster. Um, we but it's gone both ways. So for example, like me personally, my experience, um, the district manager down in Texas, Corky Trevino, he reached out to me. And oddly enough, he reached out to me on Facebook Messenger. So I, I'd never expected that type of a message to come through Facebook Messenger, but it was a very welcomed one. And I had been playing Selmer Paris, at least the majority of my horns. And so it was an easy transition and a happy one. And that's kind of how we do it now. As we have an artist relations team, and I'm the product specialist or the senior category manager, and we work together to say, you know, who's playing our product and who's doing great and who's influential, right? Because that's the whole point. And so we say, okay, let's maybe set up a call with them and see if there's an interest there. With that said, we have had some people become recommended to us. Either other artists have recommended other artists and so forth. Maybe people that we weren't quite familiar with. Sorry, we weren't quite familiar with, but we're great artists, and so we connect that way. So if someone is really interested in becoming an artist, they can always reach out and to anyone in the company and ask if they can apply. And usually it finds that its way to people in, you know, my position, you know, the category manager, and same with brass and things like that. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, we get that question a lot, just kind of as a store, you know, how do you become an artist? And usually it just varies, obviously, from company to company, but.
Yeah, it does vary. The most beneficial way is to make yourself known.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, make yourself attractive. You know, I and same with Van Doren. I didn't reach out. I didn't, you know, go emailing them and stuff. And I'm not to say that I'm special in any way. I was very, very lucky, and I was a nobody in Texas. It just worked out well for me. But the more you go and make yourself known and attractive, and this is what I think people do understand, and need to understand, is that artists are it's a win-win collaboration, right? We're there to support artists, and artists are there to support the company.
Right.
It all started because it was realized that when you have people endorsing your product honestly and sincerely, that it can help grow your sales and can establish a strong consumer base for you. And so if someone is able to influence a group of people, whether grassroots, like through a strong university professor or program, or a strong private teacher that has a massive studio, or someone who's online and has a massive following, those are all ways that people are influenced to want to play on your product. So those are all attractive to companies like ours.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that was kind of another question that we received was, you know, obviously besides teachers, what are some other avenues, or how are people best reaching specifically clarinet players, you know, new players? What other things does Conn-Selmer do besides teacher influence, possibly?
Sorry, maybe rephrase that a little bit.
So, you know, maybe like shows or events or something like that. Or what's another outreach method that Conn-Selmer could uses to reach out to other new players, basically, especially in the clarinet world? Teachers are very influential, but what are some other ways?
Yeah, so obviously social media, right? I mean, that's the big one. Working with social media influencers. That's so if we get outside of the university teachers and the schools, that's what it is. It's finding, and outside of that, it's just the top performers, because there are a hand, you know, not a handful. I mean, there's some of our top artists, right, are not university teachers. I mean, talk about Stephen Williamson, right? He's outstanding, you know, principal of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So all those really key important orchestral players and symphony players are very important. And those that are maybe not in the classical realm, right?
Yeah.
And we have several others like that as well that are incredible performers, and that's their full-time gig.
Cool.
Nice. I had another question. A little bit ago, you mentioned the team that kind of designs models and new ideas and stuff. Do you happen to know kind of how many people are usually involved in the design of a brand new model?
I do, yeah. So in my position, when I came in, it was really heavily marketing, and now it's gone really heavily over to product development. And so I run a lot of different projects for project development. We have, in the last 6 months, we've launched something like 26 new woodwind SKUs, models, and we have 56 on the deck right now that we're currently working on. Now, within each project are a group of people called stakeholders, and those are all the people involved in taking what we say from a product from cradle to grave, right, all the way to see it through. And so, for example, with us, we have our internal manufacturing team, right? Those who will actually be making the prototypes, and then we have the R&D and engineering team, which are those who are designing. So we'll go through and design the instrument. So we'll have, on one project specifically, we'll have 2-3 engineers on a project, and they'll be working both as an engineer and part of research and development. We'll have the manufacturing team, which is the entire factory, right? Because one part of the factory makes the body, one part of the factory makes the keys, one part of the, so that includes a massive amount of people. And then we have we have an artist council for the various instruments, that we rely on heavily to give us feedback on those products. And then, of course, we dial it in. So just within like a weekly project stakeholder meeting, maybe we'll have 5 to 7 people there. But of course, it includes lots and lots of other people underneath them that are working and the boots on the ground. And then once we get it dialed in, then we go into the marketing side of things, right? And that's going to be a whole different set of stakeholder meetings, right? With 7 to 10 people as well, with multiple lines underneath them working on taking photography, videography, writing the descriptions, getting all that together. So it involves, to take from cradle to grave. I don't know, especially if we take out the factory, we're still looking at 20 plus people working on a single product, on our single project.
You just never think about that as a player, it seems much smaller, that's for sure. You're just looking at the final product.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? How involved some of these things are. Right now we were working on, just this morning, we were working on a redevelopment on the taper of the socket of a clarinet. So whether your angle, your degree and angle, and how flat your plateau is at the bottom, and redesigning that. And so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 7 people just right there working on that one little project for half a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Kind of speaking of, another question that we get is about the selecting instruments. Once you get to that final product, and kind of you're an educator as well, maybe as the manufacturer side, do you feel that it's important to have certain things that you go through on the instrument as you're selecting? Or do you feel like, I know you guys have revamped kind of this setup process, which is fantastic. So your end product is much more successful in trying to alleviate some of that guesswork once it gets to a store. But what do you kind of feel are some important things that players can really look for in an instrument?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you mentioned, I mean, we've, and I apologize if you can hear some children in the background. I'm down in my basement right now. 1 second. So like you said, the consistency has really skyrocketed. Of course, the professional instruments, we were always play testing and adjusting, but we've even pushed to really improve the quality there significantly. So at this point, I feel very confident. And to be honest, the one thing that people love most about Selmer Paris clarinets is their consistency, how well they just play great out of the box. I mean, that's been known for several years now. And across the board, whether it be flutes, clarinets, saxophones, oboes, bassoons, I feel very confident. And I can only say this as a saxophonist because that's the only thing I would get up and perform a recital on. But I feel at this point I could go in and grab any instrument out of our distribution center, pull it out of the box, step out onto a stage, and play a recital. I feel very extremely confident with that. Wow. Now that's us getting that 90 to the 90%. It's important that every instrument's at that like 90%. And the reason I say 90% is that last 10% is very individual. So there's always going to be slight differences wherein an instrument may play a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. And those are all individual tendencies, especially if we're looking at genre and idiom. And depending on, you know, especially if we're talking about, you know, orchestras and stuff, what kind of sound they're looking for their hall with their orchestra. And of course, there's models involved in that. And that's why we have multiple models. But even at the instrument, there's certain characteristics that they're wanting. And that's part of a handmade instrument. There's going to be slight nuances between them, but we want to make sure that everything's sealing, everything's consistent, everything's in tune, and we make sure of that. So at the end of the day, you can't go wrong just picking one, but if you're at that level where you can tell the difference, then you should. You know, you should take the time and select from a few. Especially clarinet, right? And it's the other thing that I mentioned is wood. You know, the wood grain makes a difference, and it's an organic material and it changes. You know, so some may play with a little bit more resistance, some may play with a little bit less, and so forth. Yeah.
Sure. Looks like we just got another question here that popped up. This is something that was already in our interview that we did with you, but can you just briefly give what the different models for Selmer Paris, just briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have and I'll start kind of, and I feel bad saying this because it's not really ranked. Maybe I'll start from left to right, you know, not top to bottom. So we have the Présence, and that is with the newer generation of clarinets that Selmer Paris has come out. It has a medium bore. It's more similar to other competitive instruments on the marketplace, right, from other brands. Has a nice rich tone. It has like the chrome rings on it. To be honest, it has all the bells and whistles. It's the Cadillac. So that's the privilege. The next two I would kind of group together, and that's the recital and the signature and the recital. And the reason I group them together is simply because they've been around longer than the rest. You know, the recital came around in the 80s and the signature in the 90s. The recital has the most narrow bore and the thickest walls, incredible projection, rich, dark sound. The signature is similar to that, but it has slightly thinner walls. It's a little bit more flexible. Both incredible instruments, and we have artists that play on all of these, incredible artists. Next would be the Présence, okay, which is maybe a light version of the privilege. It's a very, very similar in bore and intonation, but it responds a little bit faster. It has a little bit brighter of a sound. And a lot of people that had played on R13s have a tendency to choose the Présence. Or anyway, we shouldn't probably get into that too much, but it's very, very, there's a lot of similarities there in terms of quality characteristics. And then the last of that Selmer Paris line is the Prologue. And that's looked at as more of an entry-level professional or a very high-end intermediate, more of a high-end intermediate line clarinet. Again, very similar to the Présence and the Privilege. And it has some watered down things in terms of its design. So it's less expensive to manufacture, but it's also very affordable. It's a very affordable clarinet to play that plays very well. So especially those students going into college that maybe can't afford, you know, a Présence or a Privilege, the Prologue will get them a long way. Yeah, it's a very reliable, great instrument.
Awesome. That's a great question. And then my next one is about warranty repair and how that works in general with Selmer.
Mhm. So Selmer Paris warranty overall, it's a 2-year warranty, 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Obviously, if somebody drops their instrument and breaks it, that's kind of user error. Uh, um, but in terms of manufacturing warranty, the standard for the standard models is 2 years, right? And so that covers lots of things. And acid bleed, if something breaks, with regular use, um, a key pin or a key or a post or something, that's covered for 2 years. If an instrument cracks, absolutely, we take a look at that very carefully, and we can either repair or replace depending on what's going on there. And then there's the Evolution series, which I think we talked about in the recorded session. The Evolution series is different in that it has a 10-year warranty against cracking. So that's obviously 5 times longer than the standard. So a 10-year warranty is pretty amazing. And that's offered on all the Evolution versions of the Privilege, the Signature, the Recital, the Présence.
Great. So speaking of wood, what are some things that you may have heard kind of through the factory? Are there other recommendations on how to best humidify clarinets? And have you heard anything on your end?
We hear lots. We hear lots of things, and there's really preferences. And to be honest, I think it does depend on the environment. And I'm not an expert on how someone should store their clarinet in Minneapolis. I think you guys are, and we really rely on the dealers and the specialists in those areas to best advise the clarinetists in those areas. It's going to
I'm
be
actually
different.
really glad that you said that. I think that does say a lot, because people will always say, well, I live in blah, 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 and we don't have that problem. And I moved up here, So I'm one of those people. I grew up in Florida. I went to, I was in Wisconsin and Michigan, went back to Florida and came up here, so kind of understand the weather a bit. But it's good that you say that, because I think that is a good resource for people, not just the manufacturer, because I think a lot of people look to the manufacturer for all the answers when it comes to that, and that's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. I mean, as we've talked about, I think we talked about this in the pre-recorded video. Like, we have put hundreds of thousands of dollars into new tooling and new process developments, and it's been outstanding. So we do everything we can to stabilize the wood, and we take forever to build a clarinet out of it, right? I mean, we season the heck out of the wood. The rest periods are so long just to ensure that it stabilizes. But so we do our best there, but we do really rely on those dealers.
Looks like there's another question kind of about wood. Do you know if Selmer has been experimenting with any of the other exotic woods, kingwood or cocobolo, mopani?
Perhaps, but I'm gonna fifth on that right now, because that does go into product development stuff.
Okay.
Looks like there's another one that came through. Is there can you do a comparison, or is there a comparison between the older classic Selmer Paris clarinets, such as Series 9 and 10, etc., and then the current instruments? I really love the quality of craftsmanship in these older instruments and love working and playing on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Selmer 9s and the Selmer 10s, and there's a great following with those, right? I mean, they're incredible instruments.
Right.
They have a great sound, and I believe that the Privilege was going back in that direction, in terms of, we had the 80s, 90s recital signature type design, and it kind of went a little bit more back to what the 9s and the 10s were at in terms of a sound characteristic. Now, with that said, is there like a comparison between? I mean, we haven't made any videos like that. we do have some really great specimens in our archives where we could put together a video, and maybe we should. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot
Hmm.
for us as dealers. So, you know, if that's a possibility, I think that would be huge on social media for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We are putting together a series of videos comparing all of our current models, so people can hear those back to back, both on clarinets and saxophones, things like that, and flutes. But to incorporate the older ones, we haven't. So that's definitely something for us to look at doing. There's been some on social media, and we're going to start sharing some where people have done it with, but not with the vintage clarinet. So yeah, that's a good idea. And if anyone else wants to do it, we'd love to hear it and share it. I'm sure lots of people would like to see that.
Amelia, we have time for one more.
Sure. Let's see. Here's one. What recommendations do you have for players that feel stuck to one specific model for a long time, or one entire brand for a long time, and then talking about, you know, brand loyalty and getting into that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do I have to say, or what advice do I have for those who are really stuck with one brand?
Sure. And yeah, would you advise them to kind of, you know, diversify and see what else is out there? And
Yeah, I would, and I would do that from personal experience. Um, I I think there's benefits to both, right? I think there's two extremes to that. I think there's the player, and we're the worst, right? Woodwind players. I mean, we really are awful with our equipment. We're equipment junkies, many of us. And there's the player who's just always playing on something different. They can't ever settle on anything. And it's like every time you see them in a rehearsal, they have a different mouthpiece, different ligature, different kind of reed, different barrel, different bell, different horn. Um, and then there's the other extreme, which is find something that works and stick with it for 50 years. And I think there's benefits to both, but you have to kind of find what is that happy medium for you. So my experience was, my soprano and my tenor were always Selmer Paris saxophones, and this is a Selmer, and then I'll give a clarinet example too. Um, um, were Selmer Paris. My alto, through my master's and doctorate, was a different brand of Selmer Paris. And this was before I was an artist. And I played on it. I was so used to it. And I thought, this is my forever horn. You know what I mean? I've already put so many hours in on it. I'm used to all of its issues, idiosyncrasies. We get along well at this point. You know, no one gets along with their instrument, especially when they're early musician. But over time, you kind of, you know, you learn to get along with it and work well. Well, then after Selmer Paris had reached out to me, and I was like, okay, well, I'll need to convert my alto over to Selmer Paris. And so I took a trip up to Elkhart, Indiana, and I hand selected my alto. And I had a recital like 1 month later after that. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to, every day I'll play on this new horn. I'll be ready for this. I mean, it was hard repertoire. But I forced myself to do it. And with it, like in less than a week, like within the first week, I was like, oh my gosh, I have been working so hard. Like my entire doctorate would have been so much easier if I had just realized this and opened my mind up and tried more instruments, you know, but I was a bit more closed-minded about it. And I will say, I had a very similar experience with my clarinet. I was not playing on a Selmer Paris. I was playing on a different brand, very popular one, and that had idiosyncrasies that I just dealt with. And then I started playing on Selmer Paris, and it's like, oh, I could have gotten a tone like this that long ago. I could have just paid money, and I could have sounded better. Oh, I'll do that all day long. So again, you know, you have to be open-minded, and you have to try stuff. And I will say that as manufacturers, we try very hard to stay close to the musicians and get their feedback and give them what they want.
Yeah.
So do keep apprised, especially of the newer products that are coming out, because it's there for a reason. It's there because that's the feedback that we've gotten, and we've spent, as you've seen, I mean, hundreds and thousands of man hours to develop new products, both on the instrument side and on the accessory side. I mean, look out for the future. There's some really cool accessories coming out as well. So
unfortunately, I think it was an error on my part once again that I messed up the settings for this webinar, and Julian Bliss was supposed to be with us today. And so we'll send any extra questions we get in an email over to him. And Stefan Gentile also mentioned that he would be happy to answer any questions if anything comes in later. So feel free to email us or send us something on our Facebook page. But Scott, thank you again so much for your time. This was fun, kind of, you know, different questions than what we asked in our interview, which I think is great. So, but thank you again for everything. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for spotlighting us and
Yeah.
letting us participate. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your week. We'll see you soon.
Okay.